Well, I think that the A National OCGFC are consolidating their control. I think that since the beginning of the genocide in October 2023, I think there's been a battle going on between the nationalistic OCGFC, the neocons, the military industrial complex, the Zionists. There's been a battle going on between them and the A National OCGFC to try to determine the direction of the Middle East. Biden is a neocon. But it seems that the A National OCGFC now have emerged. They've emerged as the triumphant faction, and they're not wasting any time. That's why the ceasefire, in my opinion, that's why the ceasefire has been forced upon Israel. Because, Gaza and Hamas, they've never been reluctant about making a deal. They've always been ready and willing to make a deal. They've offered time and time again to make a deal. But Netanyahu, throughout the genocide, has had the backing of the neocons, has had the backing of Biden, has had the backing of the military-industrial complex, and that faction of the OCGFC. And the neocons largely staff the bureaucracy of the State Department, because that's been the default political philosophy of the United States for the last 80 years. So because you have this faction that sort of dominates the bureaucracy of the State Department, there's a difficulty in a uniformity of vision, getting everyone on the same program, getting everyone on the same message. So I think that they've been grappling with each other, these two factions. They've been grappling with each other to try to achieve some uniformity of vision in terms of American policy. But I think that the election of Donald Trump actually shows that the A National OCGFC are dominant. They won this wrestling match. And the neocons, yes, are receding. They're receding in power. They're declining in power. They're decreasing in power. So as I've said many times, I think that the vision for the A National OCGFC, the financial elites who are aligning themselves with BRICS wisely, intelligently, they're aligning themselves with BRICS, they're aligning themselves with the Gulf, and that includes BlackRock. The A National OCGFC, they want to see the Middle East stabilized. They want to see conflicts end, and they want to see Zionism defanged, and they want to see Zionism eventually gone, and they want Israel to be integrated into the region. They want it to be integrated into the region with less and less dependence on the United States. And this is what has been taking shape all this time, and it's been accelerating over the last 3 months or so, really since the election. Iran is out of Syria. Iran is distancing themselves from their proxy militias, and Israel has been put on notice that the genocide has to end, that the conflict has to end. The ceasefire was accomplished clearly by Trump's people, not by Biden's people, which means that it was accomplished by the A National OCGFC. And I think that it will go forward. I think that the ceasefire will go forward. I think that Netanyahu will probably try to push back against the pressure to basically see if the neocons still have his back or not. But I don't think they will. I think everyone in Washington is going to have to recalibrate. All of the power structure in the United States is going to have to recalibrate. The neocons, the Zionists, the Israeli lobbies, and so on. Everybody, that whole ecosystem of profiteering that has been built around and has been operating for 60 to 70 years or so around the Israel colonial project, all of that is being made obsolete, in my opinion. I think that whether Netanyahu cooperates or not will basically determine whether or not he goes to The Hague, whether or not he actually faces charges of genocide and crimes against humanity. He will either exit politics by going to jail if he doesn't cooperate with the A National OCGFC, or he will exit politics on the condition that he will not go to jail. But either way, I can't personally see that he has any future whatsoever in politics in Israel. I think that under the Trump administration, we're likely to see a Saudi normalization deal, a Saudi normalization agreement with Israel. And I think that under Trump, that will probably be made, that agreement will probably be made on the basis of establishing not a Palestinian state, but on establishing an irreversible process towards establishing a Palestinian state, which is a concession. because they have been insisting upon the establishment of a state. But I think that they will agree to this concession, knowing that statehood negotiations will include regional mediators. In other words, it won't be those negotiations will not be under the auspices of just Israel and America. It will be under the auspices of the GCC and BRICS, which means it will actually be a serious process. So I think that they'll be willing to make that concession on the basis of knowing that the negotiations will actually be serious. Look, Israel is crumbling. That's a reality. That's a fact. I mean, did you know that even 1/3 of all young American Jews reportedly sympathize with Hamas now? Your own people. Almost 1 million Israelis were out protesting Netanyahu's government the other day. Now, obviously, they weren't protesting his government because they support Gaza. But the point is that society is fractured. They don't like their government. They don't like Netanyahu. You know, the global credit rating for Israel has dropped. They've spent almost $70 billion, maybe more, since October 7th. That's their own money. That's apart from the American money that they've spent, which is also in the billions. They gave up the port of Eilat. They're not able to build anything. There's no construction happening. Businesses are closing. Businesses are leaving. Citizens are leaving. And I mean, consider the fact that in Israel, there's only roughly 100,000 people, literally 100,000 people, who are really meaningfully contributing to the economy, that are highly that have high expertise in the medical sector, in the tech sector, and so on. And those are exactly the kind of people who are likely to leave, because those are dual passport holders, most of them, you know. Or anyway, they have a high level of skills, and they have a high expectation in terms of their standard of living. So these are these are the type of people who are leaving. You know, their soldiers are either defecting, or they're checking themselves into mental hospitals, or they're killing themselves. There are countries all around the world that are imposing weapons embargoes against Israel. Workers are refusing to unload Israeli goods. It's a disaster for Israel. This has been an absolute disaster for them, not to mention, obviously, their standing in the world. And by the way, no one, neither Blinken, nor Biden, nor anyone has said anything at all whatsoever about any plans or any proposals for how to revive the Israeli economy after Gaza, after the so-called war in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza. There's no plans for that. There's plans for rebuilding Gaza, but there's no plans. No one has announced any plans for rebuilding the Israeli economy. And you know how everyone is talking about Indians jumping on the H-1B visa program for tech professionals, but I can guarantee you that there's going to be a lot of Israelis who are going to apply for that as well. There's going to be a degree of a brain drain on Israel. Now, I think that the ceasefire is potentially the beginning of the next phase of actually manifesting or actualizing the regional vision of the eight national OCGFC, the vision of the Gulf, the vision of BRICS for the Middle East. I think that we're entering now the next phase where we're going to see it actually come about. Hamas will be disarmed, if not disbanded, or maybe they'll be granted a subordinate position in the government under the PA to rule over Gaza. But I think it's going to be the PA. Likely Abu Mazen will also be out as well. He might be replaced by Mohammed Dahlan, or I mean, this seems less likely, but he might be replaced by Marwan Barghouti if he's released. But I think that's unlikely. But I think that the head of the PA, the main thing is that the head of the PA, the head of the Palestinian Authority, is going to have to be someone who's loyal and who's beholden to the Gulf, to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And I think that a process is going to begin towards a two-state solution, and with GCC money pouring into Gaza for reconstruction and essentially for ownership. And like I said, and have been saying since October 2023, Israel is also going to be desperate for GCC investment. They're going to be desperate for money, which you can also translate as ownership. I think that what we're seeing is a transfer of ownership. It's going to go from being an American dependency to a Gulf dependency. And hopefully sooner rather than later, Israel will be absorbed into this developing corridor of power and control, this sphere of influence that's being created by the GCC and by Turkey. It's a shared sort of sovereignty, even if it's sometimes contentious. There's a shared influence a corridor of shared influence being created between Turkey and the GCC, stretching from North Africa all the way to Antalya. Just like I said with Syria, you have to watch the waters more than you watch the boats in this scenario, because all of the boats in this scenario are engineless, they're rudderless, and they have no sails. So they're going to move whichever way the water moves them. And increasingly, the U.S. looks like they are ready to cut Israel loose. I think they're going to cut them loose, which will just leave the waters of the GCC and BRICS. I mean, I still wouldn't be surprised to see when they have peace negotiations, when they have negotiations for for the establishment of a Palestinian state, for the two-state solution, what have you. If those negotiations don't get convened under an international peace conference, not a sort of tripartite mediation between Israel, the Palestinians, and the Americans. It's going to include China. Zionism is just not useful to anyone anymore. Or anyway, it's not useful relative to the usefulness of others, relative to the usefulness of regional stability, the usefulness of regional stability to others, meaning to other elites, financial elites. I mean, like I've said before, you can forget about all of the MAGA talk of Trump, all of the populist nationalism of Trump. He is a mascot for the a-national OCGFC. He's not a neocon, and he's not a Zionist, no matter what you think. All of his America First rhetoric, well, that's just a coded way of saying that America needs to be isolated. America needs to withdraw so that other powers can operate in the world, so that other powers, so that there can be multipolarity. Because the way that America has operated in the world up until now has been based upon serving a very narrow set of interests, basically the military-industrial complex. And the interests of the a-national OCGFC, which is the richest faction of the owners and controllers of global financialized capital, their interests are far more varied. And securing their interests requires a very different approach than what America even knows how to do. So I think most of what we're seeing happening in the region now shouldn't be surprising. It shouldn't be surprising. It shouldn't be confusing to anyone who has been following Middle Nation content, because frankly, things are playing out very much in line with what we've been saying on the channel for a very long time, at least with regards to macro trends. I mean, the conflicts are being ended. The militants are being dismantled. Stability is being pursued. It's being pursued through cooperation and cohesion of regional powers that's been created between regional powers, including the withdrawal of Iran. I think that the behind-the-scenes diplomatic work of the Arab countries and of BRICS, particularly Russia and China, but also South Africa to a certain extent, it's created a comprehensive framework. It's created collaborative relationships where everybody knows their role. All of these countries, Russia knows their role, China knows their role, the Saudis, the Emiratis, everyone, and the Egyptians, everyone knows their role and what the role that they play in that vision and in achieving that vision. And I think that the a-national OCGFC have done their part by making sure that the neocons didn't remain in the White House. That's what happened in November. And at the same time, everyone is also working together to ensure that Europe collapses, to ensure that Europe becomes a complete dependency of the United States, which you can sort of write off as a consolation prize to the military-industrial complex. They'll plunge Europe, they'll plunge the EU into chaos and to violence and conflict and so forth. I mean, I don't think that Westerners, especially Americans, and that includes the Israelis, I don't think that any of them have any concept. I don't think that they can even fathom. I think it's absolutely beyond their comprehension the extent to which leaders in the global South, how patient they are, how strategic they are, how long-term they are in their thinking. The leaders who are coming from these older civilizations, you know, the Muslims, the Arabs, the Turks, the Chinese, and so forth, you're not going to outthink them. You might think that you are outthinking them, but you're not. You might think that you're 2 steps ahead, but that's just because you can only think 2 steps ahead, and because what you're trying to reach is just 2 steps away. Meanwhile, they're planning their steps for a miles-long journey. Like I've said before, it's like trying to plan a prison break. If you're planning a prison break, you have to be very careful. You have to be very patient. You have to be very flexible. You have to make your plans so that they can adapt to new realities, to new contingencies. You have to anticipate threats, and you have to plan on how you can circumvent or neutralize those threats, and so on. And that, in my opinion, is exactly what they've been doing, what the Arab states have been doing, what BRICS has been doing, what the Chinese have been doing, even what the Russians have been doing. So, in my opinion, we have to be patient right alongside them, because nobody else has a plan or a way to implement it. They don't have the power to implement it, even if they did have a plan. But I think that the plan that they have, and the plan that they're following, and the plan that they are implementing incrementally, gradually, and discreetly, the way that they have to, I think that that plan, inshallah bi'ithnillah, will eventually lead all of us out of Western incarceration.